Welcome to the CX Sessions from the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Every episode, we provide an innovative perspective on customer experience from the people who are changing your world, one experience at a time.
Welcome back to CX Sessions from Melbourne, Australia. I'm your host, Simon Chris, and joining me today is probably the most widely read, widely heard voice in CX, Dennis Wakabayashi from Dallas, Texas, the land of the steers and all that. Dennis, welcome to CX Sessions.
Well, thank you for having me, Simon. It's an honor to talk to you on this show. I had a chance to speak with you earlier this year. It was one of the most enlightening conversations I've had all year. A chance to be on your show. It's an extreme honor. So thank you for having me here.
It was a bit of fun. So for anyone that hasn't met you, Dennis, and I doubt there's anyone in the world that hasn't seen one of your talks or read one of your pieces, tell us a little about yourself.
You know, I started my career in advertising and marketing. I cut my teeth doing customer experience strategy on FedEx, McDonald's, AT&T, Wells Fargo. So I had an opportunity to see quite a few different industries and quite a few similarities across major brands and large audiences. During that time, I was active on social media. And those two things came together in a passion for creating content and really an enthusiasm for the innovative brands and leaders like yourself in customer experience. And so I spent the last 3.5 years as a content creator, maybe you could say a CX journalist, going around the world telling these stories. In that path, I've had an opportunity to be the chairman of CX events in Dubai and Africa, keynotes all over the world, and it's been quite an experience, no pun intended.
Yeah, wow. And your podcast, CX in the Wild, is huge and widely watched and listened to.
Well, you know, probably not as much as yours. It's a little unconventional, but I'm doing it regularly and trying to make it valuable to audiences for sure.
Yeah, I think, look, I listen to it regularly. I think others would find it useful too. A little bit about your CX journey, as in, how did you kind of fall from marketing into this CX space, and where did that happen? Who were you kind of working with when that happened?
You know, my entry into customer experience was really about a realization that, and if we back up, we look at the sales funnel. So in advertising and marketing, our goal is to drive revenue. And we look at the sales funnel that lasted for about 100 years, from the end of the 1800s to the late 1990s. And around the 1990s, we had service design pop up. And service design was this just-in-time manufacturing concept, and it was highly efficient for optimizing the production of inventory. Those principles were applied to content in our advertising and marketing industry, giving birth to a genre of customer experience that optimized the stories, the content touch points for audiences. And as you followed those touch points and those conversations through to sales, you started to realize that there were operational enhancements or new ligatures that could be made that made for different brand behaviors. And that became a study of mine. And that's how I gave value to big brands. And I still do today, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, wow. And where do you see that? Where does CX start and where does it finish? Or is there a start and a finish? I don't know.
I imagine anybody would have an answer to this, but my answer would be CX starts and finishes with the human who is experiencing it. I truly believe that each person is the hero of their own story. And I'll give you an example of this that I like to share on stage, which is when I go to McDonald's. I had an experience recently where my daughter is a cheerleader. All of her friends were in the back seat. We were going down to a cheer competition. We were just headed down there. Unbeknownst to them, I happened to spot a McDonald's on the road, and it was a right-hand turn. I hit the drive-through. I knew it would be fast. I grabbed the food. I threw it in the back seat. We got on the highway, and as I was going down the highway, I looked back. They were all eating fries. They were excited. They were drinking their drinks, having their burgers. They were all very happy, ready to go to this competition. And at that moment, I was the hero of my own story. I had made this entire car of people happy through this purchase experience. It didn't have anything to do with the touch points, the speed of service. It was about my relationship with the brand where I was able to experience and provide a moment that was a core memory for all of us. And that happens in big and small ways for all of us throughout all of our purchases.
Yeah, what a great example of you being the hero. I love that phrase. You're all over the world as we all know. As you said, you're in the Middle East quite a bit, and you're in Europe, and you're heading to Berlin, and you're all over the US. We haven't seen you yet in Australia this year. We've got to change that up.
We need to.
But with all of that travel and with all of the groups that you're speaking to, what are some of the current challenges for customer experience, and are they different in different parts of the world from what you're seeing?
Challenges in customer experiences really fall into a few key categories. There are economic challenges. So you have public companies that are driven by shareholders, and the shareholders don't necessarily care about the employees or the customers. And that really creates a challenging dynamic for brands that are trying to drive value in customer experience. That's a real challenge. It's the way the model works. You have cultural challenges. For instance, healthcare. You have an ecosystem that is delivering probably the most crucial experiences of humankind, but their entire system is set up in a way that it just currently isn't modernized in terms of data and security and transparency in a way that delivers the kind of customer experiences that or patient experiences that are available, and people know that, and it creates a cultural rift. These are some of the challenges that we face. I think we also find that there are challenges with the adoption of technology that, and so much about this, that there is a front end of technology and there is a back end of technology. And that spectrum has real value across all of it, but it's not all equal, and it doesn't all apply to every brand at their life cycle. And so that disparity in time and investment of technology creates a disconnect between the identities of companies that are in the same class, the same size, the same industry, that creates confusion. And I think these are the challenges that confuse most business leaders in the space today.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to use one of your phrases. If we double click on that technology, and I love that phrase, by the way, I've been using it ever since I heard you say it. If we kind of delve into that technology adoption, are you mostly talking from the customer end or from the employee end or both?
When I think about the adoption of technology, you know, so the the relationship requires both sides to adopt.
Yep.
Customers have access to a wider spectrum of technologies than the corporations do because of the cost to entry. So
Yep.
your phone has way more apps on it than your corporation can download in a day. So I think that there's just a disparity there. You know, everybody likes to talk about Uber, but Uber had a low barrier of entry when it came to legacy technology. So they were able to rapidly improve operational expectations for the consumer. And that technology created a gap in the market for a lot of existing suppliers.
Yeah, and I think that's true of just about everybody, right? I was in a bank recently and was listening in on a call, and a customer said, "Well, I can get the answers to this in ChatGPT. Why can't you answer it? You're the bank." And so they're kind of comparing these different tech
Yeah,
stacks, right? And that's
it's so true.
impacting their view of what the experience is.
It's so true. The customer is more empowered than ever, more knowledgeable than ever. It's an interesting world we live in.
Mm. And you mentioned medical a minute ago. What other areas of business are you seeing that are really doing great with customer service or are really lagging? Are there any industries that stand out for you?
You know, what I will say is I I recently had a chance to revisit Expo City in Dubai. So
Mm,
Expo 2020 was figuratively and literally the most amazing experiences on earth at scale, both from sustainability to technology. Everything about that was the world's best. And so there you see the pinnacle of experiences being created, developed, delivered to humans.
mm,
And what do they have that separates them or makes that possible? And what it is it's a mindset of new and innovation that removes from their teams uncertainty, fear, doubt. Many people in the West will call that fail forward
mhm.
fast or you know not having a fear of failure, but it's so much more than that. Where people succeed is when they feel safe to explore new and to overcome what they don't know. That's where the success happens. And I think where people struggle is when they try to continue answering the question, the new questions with the same answers that they've
Yeah.
always had.
Yeah, and I did a piece recently around BPOs that said exactly that. They're trying to grab all this new tech and just apply it to the existing business model. But this new tech is not the type of tech that gets applied to the same business model. It drives a new business model. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Is that as you do some of these things, you've got to apply them to a whole new business model.
Simon, I'll tell you. So speaking of the BPOs, I happened to run into a woman from Google at a customer experience trade show. She was touting, her name's Raluca. She was talking about, I was like, why is Google here at this customer experience, customer service show? She said, we have this Chrome OS solution that will revolutionize a BPO. It reduces cost, it creates efficiencies, it improves security. She had a long list of, you know, great sales points,
Features and
transformational
benefits.
ideas.
Yeah.
And so what I did was, because I'm a journalist, a CX enthusiast, I took these Chromebooks. I went down to a third world BPO and I had them install them on a client. I documented the entire thing and I talked to the agents, the supervisors, the tech teams, the leadership teams, the governments. I talked to everyone about what the actual metrics were and how this operations change, what it really meant. And to your point, it was absolutely stunningly transformational. It was the adoption of a technology that if you moved in this direction, you'd never think about BPOs the way we do now.
Yeah.
And that's right. You're exactly right. There are things happening in our midst that just simply are the new and transformative way, and the old way of doing things, while great at the time and innovative at the time, have not made the leap to what's happening or what's possible.
Yeah. And it's not, I don't think it's just BPOs that are stuck in a bit of an old world, you know, cost per call, cost per transaction, blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of the in-house models are still a little bit stuck in the 1960s. And what I mean by that is in the 1960s, it was come to my shop and I'll sell you goods. And that kind of translated then into ring my phone number, email my email address, come to my website. In other words, come, rather than I'm going to be where you are. Thoughts about
You
that?
know, this is why I love talking to you, because I love your perspectives. And I will say this, I agree with everything you said. And something that I found very interesting in this last year was what happened similarly, but adjacent, with Budweiser and what happened with Kellogg. So I don't know if you follow that, but Budweiser, they tried to be inclusive and they did an influencer sponsorship with a new segment. The influencer sponsorship was well done, tastefully done, well done, and executed well. I mean, I felt like not as an advertising and marketing executive in my career, I was like, that's well executed. It had catastrophic effects on their brand. Then you had recently Kellogg's have their CEO come out and make some statements about having families eat cereal for dinner. And so two things. One, appealing to a new market segment is not an advertising and marketing crime.
Yep.
Eating cereal at dinner is not a customer crime. We've all done that. I've done it a million times, especially when I was younger. So neither one of these two things was a bad move. Here's where I think, to your point, had either one of these brands done any sort of listening or conversation with their customers prior to making that move in mass. So before the mass communication, here, all Budweiser had to do is take a quick little survey or social media statement and say, hey, we're thinking about inviting this new segment to our community. How do people feel about it? They would have had a very clear indicator about where that would have gone for them. Had this CEO done a similar thing and spoken to his audience before, or spoken to his audience rather than speaking to the public, he would have been much more well-equipped to leverage his voice to provide value to his customers. And I just think, to your point, there is a disconnect between the leadership at brands sometimes and this idea of the public versus an audience. And I think that that's a common theme that's happening more and more, not just with brands, but even I think with executives. Like, I think you understand we have audiences that we have to be responsible for. You're an executive who has an audience. I am. I think there are still those who just think I do my job and it doesn't matter, who I hurt or don't serve, or,
Yeah. And
it's an interesting.
I can't help but wonder if it's partially because some of the people who are in senior management now learned these ways of doing things when they were in junior management, carried it with them through middle, and are now up into senior and really haven't changed their views and how they do things in all of that time, because it worked for them for so many years. They got promoted and promoted. I don't know. I'm kind of spitballing there, but you know,
You're right. It's their incentive.
yeah,
It's how they're incented. If your paycheck or your bonus is dictated by how many people you lay off instead of how many families you save, there you go.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like those people who get incentivized on NPS score. And so you start getting things. I got my car serviced a couple of months ago, got an SMS afterwards saying, please give us a score 0 to 10. By the way, anybody who gives us a 9 or a 10 gets a 20% discount on their next service. So it's just buying NPS scores, basically.
Yeah.
And anyway, let's shift gears a little.
Yeah,
I'm going to
let's
ask
do
you
it.
to look into your crystal ball about the future of CX. What are you seeing coming down the pipeline? Where do you think we are in a few years' time around CX?
Here, I'll tell you where I hope we are. I hope that we start to have international standards. I think that the reason why brands lose their footing is because we don't have a international standard in curriculum or corporate assessment or certifications around CX. Because 5 different people in an organization can get 5 different certifications. There's no international body, there's no common nomenclature, and there's no common training or way to unite the performance of the teams. And I happen to know that there is a beginning of international standardization. So my hope is that people will begin to unify the definition of customer experience and its different genres, so that each of us who has a strength can be recognized for our strengths and contribute our value to the team in a way that helps corporations overcome the communication, the technological, and the cultural obstacles that prohibit us from ultimately creating more smiles around the world.
And if we drill down a little, I know you and I have talked about there. We chatted about this in Orlando. The over abuse, it's not even overuse, the over abuse of KPIs, particularly in our contact centers. What's your thought on that going forward?
You can't improve what you can't measure. But I feel like, I always have this, I always lean back on this saying that if you interrogate the data long enough, it'll tell you anything you want to hear. And so, you know, I want to be thoughtful to the audience. So many thinkers before us, before me and you, have spent so much time there was a time when we couldn't measure very much.
Yep.
And now we can measure too much. So obviously there were a lot of great people doing a lot of great work.
Yeah.
And so there's no disrespect to all those people. How do we get to a place that provides measurements that matter? And I think if I'm being thoughtful about your question, the most important thing for us to do, and not to sound contradictory of my own soapbox here, there has to be a simple relationship between the revenue of an organization, which is the engine that provides the roles and the responsibilities and the service to the customers. So revenue is still the most important metric for the sustainability of the families and the jobs that provide the smiles. You need to have the revenue metric, and you have to have some sort of performance metric against the teams. But I also think that having a outcome metric that is more empathetic than a satisfaction score is something we'd be wise to try to get underneath if we could.
It's a difficult
I don't know.
problem
I'm
to
being
solve.
philosophical here.
Yeah, it's a difficult problem to solve, that's for sure. Because, things like AHT isn't what the CX leader wants to measure. It's what the CFO wants to measure. And he wants to measure it because it goes to the heart of profitability, which is what the shareholders want. And, those exactly what you're talking
What I will tell you is in Dubai, the government has a happiness metric, and they enforce that across all their corporations. So there you have an entire region that is their government and their corporations. They have opened their minds to a happiness metric. That's a bold move.
Really
And
is.
say what you want about whoever's trying new stuff. I don't see anybody in the United States or otherwise, could you imagine if you went to the United States government and said, do you think we could introduce a happiness metric for, just to kind of level the field, just give a common goalpost for all the businesses? It'd be a really challenging
absolutely
conversation.
really would. All right, I love to ask everybody that I talk to 3 simple questions, and I'm going to rapidly fire them at you. The first one is, what makes a great experience for you personally? So when Dennis is out walking down the street, doing whatever, going to McDonald's, what makes a great experience for you?
The best experiences for me make my family feel safe.
That's a very unique answer. Any example?
Emotionally safe, physically safe, recognized, seen, heard. Safety is a often unrecognized experience. People look for the thrill, but safety is it's a strong experience.
Yeah. Wow. What a great answer. That's one of the best we've had. That's for sure. The second one, if you could go back in time to your younger self, I mean, you're not that old, but if you could go back in time to your younger self and give yourself some great advice, either about your career or about CX or whatever, what would that advice be?
I would say that the advice I would give myself is that if you could go back and get rid of all the mistakes you've ever made, you'd erase yourself.
Yeah.
So, and I saw that recently on the internet, and I just thought, the advice there is everything you do makes you who you are. And, you know, I'll just share with you, as a parent and as a life lesson, the most important life lessons I ever learned. And and I'll just share with you, parenting. I have 3 children. I raised my children. A lot of parents have a lot of rules. I only had 2 rules in the house. That was it. There was only 2. My only 2 rules were don't hurt yourself and don't hurt other people. And if you have to choose between those 2, hurt yourself, because you don't want to be the person who endangers or causes pain in other people's lives. And I think I learned that the hard way in my life. And so that's the advice I would give my younger self. I would have told myself that from day one.
Yeah, wow. Simple but powerful. And thirdly, what book are you reading or podcast are you listening to, or, TV series are you watching? What's influencing Dennis right now?
Wow. My TV browsing habits are horrendous. So I will just tell you, I watch a mix of 3 things pretty much. I watch true crime on YouTube. I watch my most recent show I watched was Warrior, which was this it was a vision of Bruce Lee's. He had this show. It got dropped twice, picked up by Netflix, and was a huge hit. So I watched that. And then I'm also watching sci-fi. I've been watching the Clone Wars. The Bad Batch.
Okay.
So pop culture stuff. And then, if you must know, I watch way too much TikTok.
Yeah, don't we all?
Yeah.
It's that thing
I
when
wish
you
I
go to
could say-
bed and you're just going to watch it for 5 minutes, and an hour and a half later, yeah.
Yeah, and if I had to pick a podcast, I think we can all say we watch Lex. Lex, you watch the Lex podcast. That guy has the best guests and they talk about the best stuff. So that's oftentimes running in the background on YouTube too. So
Yeah, nice. Well, Dennis, it's been fantastic to spend 30 minutes with you. This could have been a 2-hour podcast. And I know every time we get together, it's just like that too. So I'm hoping to see you real soon in person. But for today, thanks for being a part of CX Sessions.
thank you. And you know what I'd like to do is, just in all seriousness, outside of your show and my show, I really would love to, rather than interview each other, I'd love to pick a topic and just have a conversation about it, because you've asked me a lot of questions. But as I mentioned, talking to you, I felt was one of the most edifying conversations I've had this year. So if you'd be open to it, I might try to book with you in this next year, just a conversation that we can record that I think people would value, where we're not talking about ourselves.
I think that would be awesome.
Okay.
We'll call
Simon,
it the Masters
thank you so
series.
much.
It'll be wonderful.
All right. Thank you for having me on your show.
No problem.
That's it for this session. Let us know what you think or recommend someone for a future session at cxii.com.au. This podcast is brought to you by the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Thanks for joining us, and tune in again soon to hear more CX sessions.